Welcome to the Charts Participation Project for the WV mining problem. Here, I've downloaded and extracted the data files, and I've opened up the starter file for this project. We're going to take a look at how we can use different types of charts to visualize our data and to make some projections about the future. The first thing that we want to do is create a clustered column chart to compare prices for coal in each of the 55 counties. For this chart, we're going to head over to the prices sheet, and we need to go and select the name of the county and where the 2019 price was. That's going to be a discontiguous cell range because we just want this column and not the stuff in the middle. This is going to be a little bit tricky when we go to select. The first thing that we'll do here is click in cell A3, and then I'm going to hold down my shift key and click in A58. That's going to go through and pick up the heading and then the names of all the counties. What I want to do now is hold down the control key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to click in G3 to grab the 2019 heading. Then what I'll do is hold down the shift key and click in G58, and that'll select the second cell range. So you can see here I have these values highlighted for column A and for column G. None of this stuff in the middle is going to go in the chart. To go and make the chart, I'm going to go to the Insert ribbon, and I'll click the Recommended Charts button. What I'm going to do here is go to the All Charts tab, and under the column chart you can see we have clustered column, and if we go and work our way through we have different types, but we want a 2D clustered column chart here, which is this initial version. The 3D ones are explicitly labeled as 3D. You can see that it has some different suggestions for how the chart might be laid out. We have this first one where we have each of the counties represented by a bar, and it doesn't have all the county names displayed just because there's so many of them, but county names are across the horizontal axis and the price is on the vertical axis. The other suggested one goes and uses different color bars for all of the counties, and with 55 counties there's a lot of bars that are pretty close to each other. This isn't going to be a good choice, but this first one here is a decent chart for us to use. So we're going to select this first option and we'll click OK. You can see we have this chart here, and we're told that we want to go and reposition and resize this so that it goes and covers cells A60 through L80. So I'm just going to drag the bottom right corner of my chart here so it goes and selects those. And when we have everything expanded out here, we actually have labels showing up for each of these county bars. We want to make sure that we have appropriate titles for the chart and for the different axes. Our chart title here is just 2019, which was the heading for that column that we selected, but 2019 what? So let's say 2019 coal prices per ton. And then I need to go and add labels for the axes. So I'm going to click this little green plus button here that will allow me to add a chart element, and I'm going to check the box for axis titles, which will add both of them. I can just kind of click in the range here for the vertical axis, and this is going to be price per ton. And for our horizontal axis, I'm going to label this as county. The instructions tell us that we need to format the vertical axis as currency with no decimal places. Right now it's currency, but it has decimal places. So let's go and click on the axis label section here. It'll kind of form this box around our values. I'm going to right click and then go to Format Axis. And here we want to be on the tab that's called Axis Options, where it has the little bars down at the bottom where it says number. I'm just going to change decimal places to 0. And when I hit enter, it goes and gets rid of those decimal places. The other thing that we're told to do is make sure that every label is displayed on the horizontal axis here on the bottom, and it does appear that each of the bars has a label, so we're good with this chart. Let's go ahead and save our work. Now we want to go and create a pie chart to go and visualize the amount of coal that was mined in each county. For that, let's go over to our coal mine sheet here. The data that we're going to want is again going to come from columns A and G. I'm going to show you a little bit different way to go and select the cells that we want here, and one that might actually be a little bit easier to do. I'm going to go to the cell selector box here, and I'm going to type in the first range of cells that I want, and these are given in the instructions as A3, and then we have a colon to say that we're going to do through A58. So that's going to be the county heading and then all the county names. I also want G3 through G58. So what I'm going to do is put in a comma, and then I'll do G3 colon G58. And when I hit the enter key, it's going to select both of those ranges of cells. So that might be a little bit easier than trying to select one and then hold down the control key, select another cell, and then shift. Just typing in what you want with the comma separating the different ranges might be a better choice here. To go and insert this chart, I want to go to the Insert ribbon, and I'll click the Recommended Charts button. I want to head over to All Charts, and we said we're going to do a pie chart, but not just any pie chart, because the problem is with a regular pie chart, with 55 counties, there are going to be a ton of slices there. It's going to be really hard to be able to make out the values for the smaller production counties. What I'm going to do is this pie of pie option. What pie of pie does is it creates a main pie chart, and the counties that produce more coal are going to be on that main pie chart. But then it has a slice where it's going to group together the counties that didn't produce that much coal, and then it's going to kind of break that slice out into its own second pie chart. This allows us to go and handle cases where we just have a lot of data. It can go through and make it a little bit easier to understand what's going on. With that chart type selected, I'll go ahead and click the OK button. And it's gone and inserted this chart here. But this time, rather than dragging and repositioning this, I'm going to move it to its own sheet. So I want to right click on my chart here. Actually, I want to make sure I do it on a blank spot in the chart. And I want to go to the Move Chart option. I'm going to put this on a new sheet that I want to call Coal Mined Chart. And I'll click OK. So you can see here that it has created this new sheet that is just the chart. There's no cells on this. So this is not the same thing as if I had added a new sheet and then just cut and paste the chart over there. This sheet is only the chart. We need to do a couple things to clean up the appearance of our chart and make it easier for us to understand the data. First thing we want to do is change the title on this chart, because just saying 2019 doesn't really tell us much. Let's go and give it a little bit more descriptive title. We're going to say 2019 coal production by county. Next, we want to take a look at our slices on these charts and how they're labeled. Right now, all the slices are color-coded, and we have to go and look at this legend to figure out which colors corresponds with which county. But that's not really an ideal solution because we have so many different counties. With 55 counties, there really aren't 55 different colors that we can distinguish from one another. That's a problem. The other thing here is that right now on the chart, we can tell how big the slices are relative to one another, but that still doesn't tell us specifically how much coal was mined in a county, and that's something that we would like to know. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some data labels to these slices here, and then we're going to get rid of the legend. The first thing that I want to do is I'm just going to click on one of the slices here, and this is actually going to select all of the slices. I'm going to right click and go to Add Data Labels. And you'll see here we get some numbers pop up. These basically are the values that correspond with each of these slices. How many tons of coal were mined. So that tells us how many tons of coal were mined, but it doesn't tell us which county we're dealing with unless we still look at this color table. Let's go and fix that. And what we want to do here is click on one of the labels where it has these numbers, and that'll actually select all of them. I'm going to go and right click and then tell it to format data labels. And we'll get this pane here now. And under label options where it says label contains, the instructions tell us that we want to include the values, but we also want to go and include the category name. So that's going to go through and tell us what county we're looking at, or in the case of where we have this slice that we're breaking out for the pie of pie, it's just called other. Let's go and get rid of our legend, because now that we have the slices labeled directly, we don't need this legend, and by getting rid of it, we're going to have a little bit more room. So I just click down here to select the legend. I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard. That's going to go and make that go away. I also want to control what's getting put on this secondary pie. If we take a look right now, you can see we have some counties that have 0 on the secondary pie, some that have 0 on the main pie. What appears to be going on is just the alphabetical order of the county is controlling which pie it goes on. To go and change that setting, we're going to go and click on the secondary pie so that we get to where it says Format Data Series here in our formatting pane. I want to click on the series options where it looks like the 3 bars, and what I'm going to tell it here is that I want to split series by percentage value. You can, right now it's doing it by position. It's just looking at the list and saying at this point we're going to split things off. I can tell it by value if I want to go through and establish a hard cutoff for things, or I'm going to do by percentage value here. And I want to display things that are less than 1% on the secondary chart. So as I go and use the little down arrow here, you can see how stuff shifts around. You can see now all these counties that are 0 are all going to show up here, and they're actually kind of even overlaying on top of each other. That's kind of what we've got here. In this case, while we don't need to do it for this project, something that we might want to think about doing is when we have the chart selected, going to the chart design ribbon and then go to select data. And what we can do here is actually uncheck specific counties that we are not interested in having show up. So if we know that counties have 0 coal mined, we might just want to get rid of them from our chart altogether. But we're going to leave them on here for now. Now that we've looked at column charts, which are basically bar charts, they're just slightly different orientation, and pie charts, let's take a look at line charts, which are the other major chart type. We're going to head back to the coal mine sheet here, and we want to go and display the amount of coal that's been mined over time. For this, we're going to select a couple different non-contiguous cell ranges. The instructions tell us that we should select cell A3, and then, so I'm clicked there, I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to select by dragging C3 through G3. I'm going to keep holding the control key down after I scroll to the bottom. I'm going to click in cell A59, and then I'm going to do C59 through G59. So we're getting here where we're going to have the years from the heading at the top, and then the total amount from the total row down at the bottom. We'll go to the insert ribbon and click on recommended charts again. We want to head over to all charts, and we're going to click on line. We want just the standard 2D line chart, so that's going to be our first section here. and it's only giving us one option. That's okay. We'll go ahead and click on it and then click OK. We want to go and move this chart. So I'm going to right click on a blank spot of the chart and tell it to move the chart. And this is going to be named coal mined by year chart for its new sheet. Now you can see we have a little bit of trouble going on with our data right now. It's going through and displaying in the legend a couple different colored lines, but we don't actually see any lines on the chart. What's going on here is that the way Excel has interpreted this data, it actually isn't able to plot anything. We need to go and fix that. With the chart selected here, on the chart design ribbon, I'm going to tell it that I want to switch row column. And that's basically going to go through and flip what the individual separate lines are with what's on the horizontal axis. So now instead of having essentially 5 lines that would have just had one data point, which weren't even showing up, we have one line and then we have 5 data points here representing different time periods. So we can see with this here, there's a pretty definite downward trend in terms of how much coal is produced. Let's go ahead and get our chart labeled. For my chart title, I'm going to call this total coal production. And we need to add some axis titles. So I'll go to the green plus sign here for chart elements, choose the axis titles option. For the vertical axis, I'm going to say tons mined. And for the horizontal axis, I'm going to label this as year. I'm going to go and add some minor grid lines as well to this chart, just so that we can better understand the data. What I want to do is click on where it has the labels for the vertical axis, and I'm going to right click and tell it to add minor grid lines. So it's going to go through and add some smaller lines here to break these values up a little bit more. You can see on our chart right now that we just have one line showing in our legend. If this was going to be the only thing plotted on our chart, we'd probably delete the legend. In our case though, we're going to have a second line here in a moment because we're going to add a trend line. Trend lines allow us to go and make projections about values into the future or into the past. We're going to base a trend line on our total production line here. So I'm going to go and click on the line that I already have. To add the trend line, there's a couple ways to do it, but I'm going to right click and tell it to add trend line. You can see this new little dotted line that has appeared. That is our trend line that's based off of this solid colored line here. On the Format Trend Line pane that appears on the right when I have the trend line selected, there's a couple different settings we're going to take a look at. We're going to explore the different types that are available here in a moment. But before we get to that, I want to scroll down. What trend lines are going to be really helpful for is, as I mentioned, being able to project values into the future. And we're going to project values 5 periods into the future. Right now, we have data every 5 years, so that means 1 period is equal to 5 years. 5 periods, 25 years. That's going to take us through 2044. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on display of the R-squared value. The R-squared value is a number between 0 and 1 that goes and measures how well our trend line fits the actual data, because the trend line actually has an equation that generates it. What we want to try to find is a trend line that's going to give us a value that's as close to 1 as we can get. But we can't rely strictly on just looking at the R-squared value to go and determine whether or not it's a good trend line type for us. Because sometimes what will happen is you'll go and get trend lines that have really high R-squared values, but their projections don't make any sense. it might say that we're going to produce a negative amount of coal. You can't go and put coal back in the ground. That number doesn't make any sense. So as we go and take a look at some of these different trendline options here, we'll want to look at the R-squared value, but we also just want to apply a little bit of common sense to see if the projection that it's giving us when we go out to 2044 actually makes sense. Because we're projecting values forward here, we cannot use the moving average type, but we can use any of these other ones. So linear is a good starting place. It's at 0.974, and it's showing pretty much a straight line down with coal production. Exponential also goes and shows that coal is going to decline, but perhaps not quite as much. Its R-squared value is about 0.95. Logarithmic has sort of a same sort of curve where it kind of starts to flatten out. This one's at 0.88. Polynomial, if anything, actually goes and shows the production actually decline accelerating here, and it's actually one of those values that's getting us into negative territory. And power goes and kind of has the same sort of curve that goes and flattens out. Its R-squared value is not too good, just about 0.83. So the highest R-squared value we saw was polynomial. It's 0.989, but its projection doesn't make sense. Linear was 0.974, and I believe that was the highest of the other options. So we kind of want to think here as we're looking at things, polynomial isn't going to make sense. We can go through and tweak the order, which affects the equation that's generating things. Here we actually get a perfect match for the existing data with a fourth order polynomial, but these projections really aren't making any sense either. As we increase the order, it's showing we're going more into negative territory, or that all of a sudden coal production is going to zoom upwards, which doesn't seem likely. We're probably between linear, which is basically following the same downward trend, or something like exponential probably being the best of the ones that's going to show the decline flattening out. This is kind of where you get to a judgment call. And I'm going to go with linear just because it is a significantly better fit for the existing data. Things are kind of bobbing around a little bit, but there's a definite trend here. And the linear goes and pretty well matches that. So I think linear is going to be our best projection here for coal production. So by the time we get out to the end of the line here in 2044, we're saying that West Virginia is only going to produce about 22 million tons of coal, as compared to about 170 million in 1999. That's a pretty big drop over a span of just shy of 50 years. But that appears to be the trend that we're looking at. So far, we've taken a look at big charts to go and display data. Sometimes, though, we just kind of want a quick little visual summary of what's going on with the series of data. And we might actually even want to embed that inside of our worksheet in a cell. Sparklines are a newer feature in more recent versions of Excel that are going to allow us to do that. To use the sparklines, let's go ahead over to the total values sheet. We've got this column J that we're going to use to store the sparklines, but the first thing that we want to go and do is go and select the data that's going to go into our sparklines. So what I want to do is click in cell C4, which is Barber County's 1999 value, and I'm going to drag down to G58 so that we have all of these numbers here. On the insert ribbon, you can see there's this sparkline section. The two types of sparklines you're going to use most frequently are line or column, and basically they are miniature line charts and column charts. I'll go ahead and click the line option because that's what we want to use for this particular case. And we have to tell it where we want to put the sparklines, this location range. I'm going to click on the little cell selector box here, and then I'm just going to choose J4 down through J58. We'll click on the selector button again, and I'm going to click OK. And what you're going to see here is essentially a little one series, one line plotted miniature line chart that allows us to go and see how these values are changing over time. So in a lot of cases here, things are flat. You know, these counties that didn't produce any coal, their value of the coal that was produced remained zero. So it's just a straight line. But for some of these other ones here, they're going and changing over time. So like if we go and see Preston County here, it started off at 36 million, went up, so the line goes up to 65, and then it crashes down to 6 million before it just kind of zeroes out. So just kind of quickly looking as we scroll through here, these spark lines allow us just to sort of, you know, get a general idea of what's going on over time with these patterns across different counties. So this is kind of a nice little feature here. If you're just trying to do some quick comparison of data, this might be something you want to think about. Let's go and take a look at our analysis question to wrap up this project. This is going to be question 7B. And we're asked how much coal being mined is predicted for 2044 and whether or not we think that prediction is reasonable. Well, let's go back and take a look at our coal mined by year chart. And on our chart here, this is 2044 where we've extended out with our trend line. Our major grid line is at 20 million, and each of these minor grid lines is 4 million in this case. So you can kind of see our dot is sort of smack in the middle of between the 20 million line and the 24 million line. So we can say, you know, about 22 million tons of coal is what our estimate is. So we'll say here about 22 million tons of coal are predicted to be mined in 2044. And then we have to say whether or not we think it's a reasonable projection. And in my case here, this is kind of a value judgment based off of just me looking at the data. It's somewhat subjective, but you know, I think this is a reasonable estimate as it follows the trend of mining declines over the past 20 years. So looking at that 1999 to 2019 period. And that's what we have with our project. You'll want to go and save your work and close out of Excel and then submit this project.